Alright guys, TacticalRab back again today. Hope you're all doing well and enjoying your day so far. We are now pretty certain as to what all 12 teams are going to be for the CDL in 2023. It's about time we talked about some power rankings and where these teams might potentially stack up, not just for teams, but also for the players themselves in terms of who are the favourites to get the MVP for this season this time around. Very much enjoyed your thoughts in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. I'd greatly appreciate it. It really helps out the channel. Thank you very much indeed for doing that one. Firstly, we've got to talk about some Rostermania stuff. This I thought was very interesting here from JP Krez, linked actually, of course, former New York Subliners analyst, linked recently to OpTic Texas as their potential analyst alongside Rambo as the head coach. Sender, though, apparently now might be staying on that team as kind of their analyst role or whatever, kind of like they had last season, and JP might not be joining. Now, it's unclear where JP would go if this is the case, because I thought he would be like one of the top prospect analysts really in the entire scene, but he replies to his kind of free agent tweet yesterday saying, I should also mention I'm open to hearing about all opportunities, including those in Valorant franchising as well. Pretty interesting, right? Because, of course, the VCT or whatever is franchising right now or partnering. It's kind of a weird situation they've got going on over there compared to traditional franchise leagues in sports and also what Call of Duty and Activision have done with the CDL and the Overwatch League. But, yeah, JP also interested in potentially leaving COD or at least joining an organization of which I suppose there are very few. 100 Thieves might be the only one where they kind of have both going on, with Call of Duty and Valorant franchising also in the work. So maybe implying here that wherever JP was going to go has now fallen through in COD and he's now exploring even Valorant options elsewhere as well. Stay tuned for that one. Now this I thought was kind of remarkable really with regard to Royal Ravens. According to Ben J. Nassim, he believes that Ravens' substitute might well be Scraps for this season. Of course, Paul X, Asim, Zero, Nasty is rumoured to be the team 4, and I believe it's a big surprise to many, including myself, that they didn't manage to lock down Wardy or Beans as their substitute players. Now I think I'm surprised in the first place they didn't put Wardy in the starting team, because I think they could have maybe done that. But apparently Wardy turned them down, or maybe turned down a sub spot, not sure. But I believe one of the articles that I saw recently said that Wardy effectively turned down the Royal Ravens spot to go to the subliners bench, which is the current rumour where Wardy's going to go. Top prospect player, of course, from the European scene in the Challenger side last season. Beans, similar boat. He's gone to the Boston Breach bench with their academy system alongside Doug Sid to Martin, it seems. So either London fumbled the bag there, or those players decided just to turn down any offers, and now it leaves them with a team that I don't think is as good as it could be, and they're looking for a substitute player where there's many other options they could have gone for, and Scraps, of course, after now a couple of years, I suppose 1 year out competing in Vanguard, might well now get the spot. Now look, I like Scraps as a player and I think he's a fantastic player, and hopefully he can get back to the level that he was at a few years ago, but the idea that Scraps just walks straight back into the CDL effectively after a lot of guys have been grinding very hard, it does make you wonder to some extent about the Friendship League, especially because, he didn't even play in Challengers last season, right? So, I would argue that, yeah, Scrap's a very talented player, but you would think that there were some other guys out there in Challengers that maybe, you could argue, deserved a shot or whatever a little bit more than Scrap. So he only should at least have to play a few months of Challengers or whatever to prove that he actually belongs in a spot back on the Ravens, right? Great player, so I think he can work out for them either as a bench player or a starter, but I think it's interesting to look at regardless, right, compared to the other options that maybe they either could have gone for or decided to reject them because not really sure what's going on there in the London camp, to be honest, the last few months. I think questionable decisions all around, and I don't think this team's going to be particularly good either, to be honest. But we'll see here in a second where it ranked in terms of power rankings for the upcoming season. Speaking a little bit also of Rostermania, just this real quick from Arcitys, because we of course have the Black Ops 2 Invitational that Hitch is throwing next month in the middle of October. We saw some of the teams yesterday, Embo's and Killer, Scump and Big Time were two of the teams. To mention Rambo Karma is one of the other ones. I think it's JCap and Envoy is the fourth team. They of course need further players. Now Arcitys is going to be joining to play on one of those rosters as well. So exciting stuff to see him there also, and hopefully it's going to be a fantastic event, of course, a few weeks away. This just to mention real quick from Attach as well, because we talked about some of the issues earlier today with Modern Warfare 2 and the things that Infinity Ward seemingly do not want to change, but the movement is an interesting change this year really, with seemingly no slide cancelling. It does maybe still exist, you can probably exploit it in some way or another, but really it doesn't seem to be the most viable movement. And it is interesting in a second here where we talk about teams and players to watch really, where some players might find themselves in a position where the game isn't so suited to them this season it has been previously. Attach, of course, we know that he does love his hot takes, right, about Modern Warfare 2 being the best game of all time, and also about clearly their movement being way better, he says, than the slide cancel era. But look, we can say players like Accuracy, for example, not exactly a slide cancel merchant in his time competing. Is he going to have a much better time here in Modern Warfare 2 than he has done in previous titles? You could certainly argue that, right? And of course, some players might not like it so much with no slide slide cancelling in the game. Is it going to make things better? I would personally like to see, if there's going to be no slide cancel, have faster weapon handling, pull-up time, ADS time, this type of stuff. But I kind of doubt Infinity Ward are going to comply with that because it doesn't really suit what they are trying to achieve here in this game. Let's talk then about some of the teams going into the new title. So of course, we believe we know pretty much what the teams are. I think there's 3 teams yet to be officially confirmed, at least as of recording there. The New York Subliners, which we believe is going to be Skies, Hydra, Priester, and Kismet, of course, as the team of 4. There's also the Ravens that we just talked about, Zero, Nasty, Porlex, and Asim. And then there's Vegas that we think is going to be Clay, Prolute, Temp, and TJ Halley. Those are all the teams, plus the ones that, of course, that have been currently confirmed. And of course, many of these teams have some day one duos amongst them. Shotzzy and iLLeY, of course, over at the OpTic side. CleanX and Inside from way back in the day. Of course, Simp and aBeZy. And then, yeah, Pred and Sib, I suppose, as well here across these 4 teams. So definitely some of the teams that should be, arguably, these 4 could be in the top 4 of the rankings. Of course, a lot of these guys, well, at least OpTic and, of course, Seattle Surge decided to stay together for the new season. Of course, all these duos are still together for this upcoming season as well. And in terms of power rankings, we've actually already got some champs odds arriving here. So as Chrome points out, 2023 champs odds are out, and even, well, apparently Las Vegas Legion, as we'll see in a second, have better odds than Mutineers. So this is kind of impressive, actually, from Florida to manage to form a roster that apparently is going to be the least likely team to win champs going into the season, despite the fact that Vegas haven't even announced their team yet, and it's none other than the Paris Legion. So this is the list that is, I think, I'm guessing this is Bet365, but this should give a reasonable indication of what the power rankings effectively should look like for the upcoming season, right? So this is like not quite necessarily going to be aligned with power rankings at the start of the season, just because you might expect that some teams that are going to be the most likely to win champs might not be the best at the start, or the other way around. Like, for example, Accuracy's teams generally are pretty good at the start of titles and don't necessarily maintain that performance over time. So, you know, Surge or even like Clayster's teams generally are quite good at the start of games as well. At least individually, Clay is usually a better player at the start, you could argue, than he is at the end. Maybe that's not true in history, but it seems like he starts out strong generally, as does Accuracy. So maybe teams like even Vegas or even Surge could be higher ranked at the start of the season, but maybe this is valid across the entirety of it, right? So what they reckon is, at least in terms of power rankings for World Championship performances, that FaZe are number 1, OpTic are number 2 just behind, then Thieves, the reigning world champions here, 3rd on their list, then Toronto 4th. Pretty interesting, right, the Toronto this high on their list at least. Minnesota Rokkr 5th, Seattle Surge 6th, of course, despite the team that stuck together, and then quite a way behind you then get Los Angeles Guerrillas, the New York Subliners, and then the 4 teams expected not to make it, of course, Boston, London, Vegas, and Florida Mutineers. I certainly agree with these bottom 3. I don't even really think that it's worth ordering them too much, because you never really know. Coming up with a real order going into the season, especially in terms of who's the most likely to win champs, is really difficult to do. But yeah, I certainly agree. These 3 in my books aren't making champs, and then Boston are probably the most likely outside of that not to make it as well, I would say. So probably a pretty decent list. Of course, I guess kind of comparable to what Ben J. Nasim put together. He, of course, has done his in tiers, which I think is probably more sensible going into the season, just because you don't really know, especially because a lot of these teams are unproven. But yeah, Ben also has a world in which FaZe and OpTic are number 1, number 2, either in different orders. Maybe he didn't really rank these, but I think it's probably understandable in a way, even though Thieves are the reigning world champions, don't necessarily get the respect on these tier lists that you could argue they deserve, because they're 3rd in a lot of people's books across the board. And I would maybe be inclined to agree. It's kind of difficult to say, but that's what we have right now for power rankings. I might do a more in-depth one from my perspective in the coming days, but thought it was interesting to look at, because we've also got to talk about this, which is apparently the MVP kind of, well, odds for the season as well. Which players are most likely to walk away with the MVP trophy at the end of the season? Now, this is the regular season one. Now, of course, every year we've had it so far, it's not been the same player that's won, as in we had Shotzzy year 1, Simp year 2, Cellium year 3. Like, you know, is it going to be one of those repeat players, right? That's possible. Is there going to be a back-to-back winner like Cellium? I suppose we'll have to see, but Cellium apparently is the most likely. Then Dashy, then Simp, Kenny, Shotzzy, aBeZy, Scump, and Scrappy. I thought it was crazy to have Scrappy here, like right up there, as apparently a potential MVP favorite for the season, despite being over on the Toronto Ultra, not a team you'd expect necessarily to be dominating events, but interesting nonetheless. And then Pred is here, CleanX, of course. Like, you know, Pred at the end of the season was arguably the MVP for the last few events, in fairness. He was certainly in the conversation, but of course he was never going to be there off the results and stuff that the others achieved over the course of the season at least. But in terms of like SMG MVP, I think he was certainly right up there. So yeah, lots of interesting players of note. It falls off very quickly when you get down here to the likes of Clay and, you know, Temp and stuff, 150 or so to 1. But this is pretty much the order of teams, right? So Cell, Dashy, Simp, and those guys pretty much top of the pecking order. And it makes sense in fairness, right? FaZe and OpTic OpTic, though, pretty much across the board, seem to be the two key favourites for next season. Is that fair enough? I think that OpTic, of course, stuck together. We know what they're capable of. Are they quite as good as this is implying? Maybe, maybe not. But it's also difficult to say how good FaZe will be because that's not an entirely new team, of course, but Slash is coming in. Will he get the results out of that team than they've got with Arcitys, let's say, in Cold War? That's a big question mark. But they go in apparently as favourites to the new era. Clay, of course, from back in the day, legendary player. He's been speaking with a lot more optimism lately. So I think that even though it's not yet confirmed officially that he's going to be on the Vegas Legion team for next season, I think we can reasonably assume that may well be the case, right, going into next year. And I do honestly kind of like that Clay Temp AR duo. It's just the SMGs that, you know, bring me a fair bit of concern in Prolute and TJ. Like, I kind of doubt that lasts the test of time in the season. And just a couple of interesting things to finish out the video here for you guys. This from Brian Satch, I actually thought was kind of crazy. How many pro lands were competed in before these players got their first victory at an event? Scump, Big T, Rambo, Sharp, Dodgers, and Bobby all won at their first time of asking. Standy, Shotzzy, iLLeY, Aches, TP, and Miracles at their seconds. Maybe names that you guys will know a little bit better, but still some, of course, some legendary names up top here. And then Simp, Merc, Kappa, Zuma, and Spart all won at their third event. So thought it was some pretty cool numbers to look at, right? Scump winning at his first time of asking. And just a little game for you guys here, really, from the LAG. Reply with a COD gun that people forget about but shouldn't. I think this is, I'm guessing this is the AUG from either Black Ops 1 or from like Modern Warfare 2 or whatever game the AUG was in, but that was a fantastic gun back in the day. Ton has a good one here with the G11 from Black Ops 1. There's some other guns as well, the PO6, the RK5, like I guess this is the Locust, right, from Black Ops 3. This, I think, is, I mean, what was it called? The PM63, maybe from Black Ops 1. I didn't really use this gun much, but it's pretty good. And I'd even say from that game, it's something like the Commando, maybe from Black Ops 1, is rarely talked about, but honestly, absolutely legendary. So very much intrigued to your thoughts on all this stuff in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new. Take care, and I'll see you next time.
Real interesting one. I don't think anyone saw ASIM ending up on this team before Rostermania started. That was definitely came out of nowhere. Really interesting squad. I talked about it in a couple of videos I put out. Even more interesting is I've heard that Scraps will be the substitute for this team. So like,
no way.
That'd be dope.
Let's go. He's back, baby.
So you take that even further, and that's I think Tom's probably heard similar. And it's like suddenly now you have this weird Black Ops 4 FaZe vibe potentially going on this team. They want to make a change. But I think to the interesting point, like this is an interesting squad. Do they have the talent of some other teams? Not necessarily. They have some players who have been inconsistent at times, absolutely. But you know, a more clear direction on this team, and maybe a little bit more backbone potentially for this team because they, again, were really skilled last year, but against top teams and sometimes on land, that promise they had online didn't really show.